Alright, so this is the application that we're gonna create today. As you can see, it has a super modern look to it, super simplistic, it has multiple views, and it's just all in all super easy to use. This one's gonna be a blast, so make sure to check out the entire episode. And don't forget that the source code and all the project files will be available on my Patreon that you will find in the description down below. Let's get started. Right, so starting off, you wanna create a WPF app, .NET framework, so it's gonna be C#, SAML, Windows, and desktop. So we're not doing .NET Core in this one. We're using the .NET framework. Let's give it a name. I'm gonna call this Modern Design. I'm gonna click create and it's gonna create the project for me. Now there are a couple of things I like to do before starting the actual project. That is fixing my layout. So I'm gonna hit this vertical split right here. That's gonna make it so I have the designer on the left hand side and the SAML on the right. Right, I'm gonna clean this up a little bit. I'm gonna remove the title because we're not gonna be using that anyways. And let's start by adding some folders. Right, now let's go ahead and add some folders to the project because we're gonna make sure that this is all nice and structured. First folder is gonna be core. Second folder is gonna be fonts because we're gonna be using a custom font. Third one's gonna be images. Fourth one's gonna be MVVM. This one's gonna contain subfolders. We'll get to that in just a sec. And obviously theme. Now within our MVVM folder, we wanna create a new folder called model. Another one called view. And then one more called view model. There we go. Now, if you're worried, there isn't going to be a whole lot of backend code. We're going to be mainly focusing on the UI, but we are going to have to implement some backend stuff in order to have multiple views and whatnot, and we're doing this properly. So, right, so within our core folder, we want to create a new class. We're going to call this observable object, just like that. We're going to add that. This one's going to inherit from iNotify property changed, that interface. So, iNotify property changed. We're going to have to import the using namespace. There we go. And you can see that we currently have an error. That's because we're not implementing the actual interface. I'm just going to hover over the interface and control dot and implement interface. Right, so that actually implemented the event. Now let's go ahead and implement the onPropertyChanged method. That's going to be protected void onPropertyChanged. This is going to take an attribute, caller member name. We're going to have to import that namespace too. String name equals, and we're going to put it as null for now. Now we need to null check the actual event. So property changed, question mark, dot invoke. So if it's not null, we want to invoke it. The sender is going to be this. And for the event args, we want to create a new property changed event args. And we want to pass in name. Just like that. And that's it for our observable object. We can close that down. Now, real quick, if you don't know what the iNotify property change is for, I would highly recommend you looking into what it does and how you use it. It's mainly used for updating the UI when binding. I am going to make a dedicated video just for that. It's okay, as for now, just follow along. It'll be just fine. Now, we want to create a relay command. We could go with a normal command, but I don't like how static they are and how not flexible, if you will. Let's go ahead and create a new class. We're going to call this relay command. There we go. Gonna inherit from iCommand. Again, just import the namespace. Now this time we're not going to implement the interface as suggested. So we're going to create two private fields. Private action. It's going to be of type object. I'm going to call it execute. Or it's going to create a private func, which takes two types. Object and bool. We'll call this can execute. We're now going to create the event. So public event. Event handler can execute changed, followed by curly braces. Now we want to add and make use of the command manager dot require suggested, and we're going to hook onto that event with value and essentially do the same thing. We're going to unsubscribe using remove and then minus equals. Also make sure not to forget the semicolon at the end of value. There we go. All of this might look super intimidating, but trust me, it's super easy. And again, I will have a dedicated video on relay commands in the future as well. All right, let's create a constructor. Takes two parameters. It's going to take an action of type object. We'll call this execute. And a func, you guessed it, of type object and bool. It's going to be called can execute equals to null as default. Should be can, not call. And just to eliminate the factor of having to use the this keyword, we're actually going to put underscores in front of the private variables. All right, so underscore execute. We're going to assign that to execute. Same goes for can execute. We're going to assign that to can execute. There we go. Now we need to finish this off with two simple functions. It's going to be a public bool can execute. It's going to take a generic parameter called object parameter followed by curly braces. Now this is obviously going to return a bool, so we're going to do return underscore can execute equals null, so we're checking if it's null, or underscore can execute, and it takes the parameter. Parameter. There we go. Now for the final function, which is actually the easiest one, it's not going to return anything. It's just going to be public void execute. It takes a parameter object, a generic one, parameter followed by curly braces underscore execute, and pass in the parameter. There we go. And obviously, if you didn't finish off the curly brace at the end, you have to do so. All right, there we go. Right, to make sure to spell this right, otherwise it's not going to be, it's not going to recognize the actual event handler. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. There we go. And believe it or not, but that's actually the hardest part done with. The next is just going to be view models, and those are simple. But before we can do that, let's actually start working on the UI. Alright, so starting at the top, we want to change the height to roughly 600. The width is going to be 920. For anyone who wants to make this resizable, by all means you can. I don't feel like that's a good idea for this design. Moving on, window style, let's set it to none. Resize mode, no resize. Background transparent, allow transparency, true. Now instead of this grid, we're actually going to be using a border. So border. Here we go. Let's set the background to something like, let's see, 27, 25, 37. Yes, this is a really cool part. Pay attention to the corners. See how they're like super sharp. Corner radius 10. Kind of hard to see, but you can see that it's actually, rounded off. You can change that to 20. And it's even more rounded off. That's easier to see. All right, now we can actually create the grid inside here. And we want 2 columns and 2 rows. So we're going to do grid.column definitions. Column definition, we're going to add 2 of those. Same goes for the row definitions. So grid.row definitions. I'm going to create a 1 row definition and then another one. Now here's the thing. We want the first row to not be as tall. So we're going to set a height of, let's do 75. It's perfect. And the first column is actually going to have the width of 200. That's going to resemble the menu, the logo. You can have whatever up here. In our case, we're going to have a custom text box. And then this is going to be the place for the actual view that changes. All right, so first things first, let's start off with the logo at the top. This is just going to be like a simple name logo. You could switch this out for an image, whatever. As for now, we're just going to use a label. Actually, we're going to use a text block. We're going to set the text to Elysian, just like in the example. The vertical alignment is going to be center. Horizontal alignment, center. Foreground, let's put it at white. Font size, that's font weight. Font size is going to be 22. And that's good for now. Let's move that into the grid. There we go. As we can see, it's looking pretty darn nice. It's missing the custom font, but we'll add that later on. And you know what? I don't like it being in the middle. I want to have it more to the left. So horizontal alignment, left. That's obviously going to be too much to the left. So we're going to add a small margin to it. So margin going from left, top, right, and bottom. We'll do 20, 0, 0, 0. Let's clean this up a bit. Oops. There we go. That's looking pretty nice. Now let's go ahead and create the actual menu. This is going to consist of a stack panel because we're going to stack the buttons on top of each other. Stack panel. There we go. We're actually going to assign it because it's currently in the first row in the first column. We don't want that. We want it in the first column, but the second row, which is index based. So we'll do grid.row 1. See how it moved down there? We have it at 0. It's going to move up there. Right. And this is where we're actually going to start creating our own theme. We're going to use a radio button rather than a button. And it's just going to be amazing. Right. So starting off, radio button. We're going to self-close that. And if we look at it like this, that doesn't resemble a good looking button at all. Anyways, we're going to set the content to home. We're going to set the height to 50. The foreground is going to be white. Font size is going to be 14. And this is where we're actually going to create the style for it. All right, so within our theme folder, if we want to add new resource dictionary, we'll call this menu button theme. You can give it whatever name you want. Right, and in here, we're going to create the style. So, style. This is based on a static resource of type, so X type, toggle button. Target type is going to be of X type radio button because that's what we're actually targeting. And obviously, a key to access it, so X key. We'll call this menu button theme. So whenever we apply style, that's what we're going to reference to. Right, so let's create setters. Style setters. The first setter is going to have the property of template because we want to customize the template. We're going to give it a value. So setter value is going to be of control template, which is going to contain a grid. So what we're doing right now is we're essentially styling the template of the radio button. It's going to make sense as soon as I add the text box to it. So let's give the grid some properties, such as vertical alignment, stretch, horizontal alignment, stretch, the background of the actual, because the grid is going to define the background. We're actually going to bind that to the template. So template binding background. All right. And inside the grid, we're going to have a text block. The text property is obviously going to be, we don't want to set it. Okay, wait, just to demonstrate, I'll set the text to hello. You can do so as well. That's the only thing we're going to change later on. So just follow along for now. Vertical alignment, center. And we're not going to set a margin just yet, just in order to see how things look. Right, so let's create a couple more setters. So setter, self-close, property is going to be background. Value is going to be transparent. We'll create another one called border thickness. We'll set the value to 0. And we are going to set the actual, the font of this style in here as well. But we haven't imported the font yet, so we'll do it in a bit. Under the setters, we want to create a trigger as well. So style that triggers. Create a trigger with the property is checked because we want to check if the button's actually checked because it is, after all, a radio button. If the value is true, we want to change the background. So if the button's selected, if it's showing that particular view, we want to change the background of the button showing, well, indicating that it's actually selected. That's going to make sense in just a sec as well, if it didn't already. It's going to have a setter. We're going to set the background, property, background, so slightly darker color. So like 22F. That's a hex value. All right, and that's essentially the menu button theme done. Now, in order to use this, we need to head over to the app.saml. Within the application resources, we want to create a resource dictionary. In here, we want to create a resource dictionary dot merge dictionaries because we're going to have two styles. We're going to create a resource dictionary with a source. It's going to be themes. Actually, it's just theme. Yeah, slash, and then the name of the menu button theme. So you just copy that over, paste that in .saml. So it would be menu button theme.saml. All right, so heading back into the main window where we have the actual menu, let's apply the actual style. So you see this, the horrible style that we have right now. Yeah, let's apply the one that we just created. Style, static resource. And you can see that the menu button theme shows up. Voice crack. This is what I wanted to show with the margin as well. You see how it's like the text is super close to the left. We don't like that. Head back over into the actual style and let's add a margin to the text block. So remember, it's from left top, right bottom. So we'll do like 50, 0, 0, 0. Heading back into here, we can see that the text now is slightly shifted over to the right. Right, and if we were to add more radio buttons, obviously there would be more. So we could do like discovery, and then featured, like whatever you want your menu to say. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. It only says hello because, well, duh, we set it to hello here. And you might be thinking, how do I get it to the content that's on the actual template? Well, I'm glad you asked. So heading back into the actual text block, instead of just the static text hello, we want to do template binding. And one of the properties on the template is content. I want to change the control template to have the target type of a radio button so that we can access its properties. So we want to do text template binding. We can do property for the sake of being explicit. We want to set content. Now, if we tab over, we can see that all the text is as it should be. Everything is just fine and dandy. We can even go ahead and run the application and click each individual button, and we can see that it selects whichever one we select. That's because they're all in the stack panel, so they're all grouped automatically. All right, we're not going to bind commands to it yet because we haven't even started the view model. I'd say since we're on the topic of creating our own themes, let's go ahead and create that search button up here. That's going to be a simple text box. We're going to set the width 250, height to 40, vertical content alignment, center. That's going to be so the actual text, the blinking timeline thingy, it's going to be set in the center. Horizontal alignment, we'll put it at left. We'll add a margin of 5. And you see how it's stuck in the first column. How do we change that? Grid.column, well, not dot one, but we're passing 1 as the value. All right, you got yourself a text box. Doesn't quite look like the one that I showed you in the example. That's because we haven't applied the style yet. Now this style is going to have a little bit more code to it. It's not going to be much at all, and it's going to have an amazing outcome. So let's go ahead and create a new resource dictionary. Let's call it text box theme, or whatever you feel is an appropriate name. Gonna add that to the project, and just like before, we're gonna create a style. Target type is gonna be well, X type, and since we're working with a text box, it's gonna be a text box. Can't forget the key, so we can access it. X key, called modern text box or something similar. Now let's create a setter for the property template. You guessed it, setter. Obviously a setter.value. The control template is going to be of target type, X type, there we go. Text box, going to contain a border rather than a grid. Corner radius, because we want to round it off, 10, hence why we want the border. Background, let's do 33, 35, 40. 35, 33, here, we'll do 35, 33, 40. The width is going to be 200, height is going to be 40, which kind of makes it redundant setting it here, but you know, we'll fix that in just a sec. Right, within the border, we want to create a grid. We're just gonna hold everything. We'll add a rectangle, stroke thickness, put a 1. We might not need a rectangle. We'll check it out in just a sec. Right, we'll create a text box, margin 1, margin 1. Text is obviously going to be bound to the template, so template binding, property. Actually, we don't need to specify property, we can just say text. Border thickness, going to be 0. Background, transparent. Vertical content alignment, center. Padding, 5. Foreground, so the actual text color, we'll do CE, 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 or CF, CF, CF. CF looks better. That's a better color. And we actually need to specify a name for this one because we're going to do some custom things here. Call it search box. So what I'm demonstrating right now is, you see how it says search right here? When we click this and start typing, that placeholder text goes away. That's the function that we want to accomplish right here. Now, right underneath the text box, we want the text block, so not a text box, but a text block underneath. It's not going to be self-closed. Going to have a couple of properties. Is hit test visible, false, making it to where we can actually click through this text block. Text is going to be search, or whatever you want your text holder text to be, or whatever you want your placeholder text to be. Vertical alignment, center. Horizontal alignment, left. Margin, so going from left to top, right bottom, 10, 0, 0, 0. Font size, 11. Foreground, dark gray. And it's going to be in a grid, column 1. All right, let's add a style to this because we need to add a trigger, a style trigger. Hence why when we type something, this entire thing just goes invisible. So text block style. Let's create a style in here. Target type, X type, text block, style that triggers. I want a data trigger in here. I want to do some binding text of the element name. So given the path, it's to element name search box, setting value, value, nothing. So when the value is nothing of the text of the element name, so when the element search box, which we defined here, when the text property of that element has the value of nothing, we're going to create a setter property visibility, going to have a value of visible. So we're going to show this placeholder text when there's no text within the text box. Otherwise, a default setter property, this is really important as well, visibility value hidden. All right, so if there's value or if there's text in here, we're going to just hide this one. All right, believe it or not, but that's actually it. That's how simple this theme was. Just a bunch of properties, really. Now let's head over to the app.saml and add that one as well. This one's text box theme. There we go. And let's look at this beautiful transformation when we add the style. Style, static resource, which is not even here. Actually, it is. Modern text box. There we go. I'd mistaken it for the other one. I realized that it's a text box. That's why. All right, trying this out. Here we go. Look at that. That's, it's so easy. All right, so the final stretch, this is where the fun stuff's gonna start happening. This is where we actually start adding content, making the application look more alive, and all that fun stuff. Right, so underneath the text box, we're gonna add one more control. Then everything else that we do is gonna be separate views and stuff like that. So, that's gonna be all fun. Create a content control, set grid.row. It's obviously going to be the first one. So if you go down one, grid dot column 1. So now we're in this one right here at a margin of 10, and you can't see it right now because obviously there's nothing within the content control, but this is where we're going to start binding stuff. You know, that's not theme related, actual data. So this might sound super scary, but trust me, it's really not, and it's a really cool concept. Let's head into the view model, create a new item, well, a new class, call this main view model. We're going to start by inheriting from our observable not collection, observable object that we created earlier. Gonna import a namespace. All right, since we don't really have we don't have a new view, so we're actually gonna create a new view. Let's create a constructor as well, so it's not as empty. And we can't really bind to a view if you don't have a view yet. So we're gonna create a new view. So heading into the view folder, right click, add user control. This is gonna be our home view. We're gonna go and add that. Split the designer, and let's go ahead and, you know, change. Actually, we can keep those there. We'll keep the background transparent so that we can see the actual background of the main application. Right, so if we take a look at the application, we have everything stacked in a stacked layout. So we got the text block, we got some borders, some more borders, you know. That's what we're gonna do right now. Instead of a grid, we wanna stack panel, create a text block. Set the text to discover, foreground, white, font size, it's going to be 28, horizontal alignment left, so it doesn't take up that much space. Margin going 0, 0, 0, 20, because we're going to add some margin to the bottom of this, so it's not too close. And the font family we're going to change later on once we import the font. Now remember how there were two borders right here, so we're going to create a stack panel underneath with a horizontal orientation. Stack panel, orientation, horizontal. Going from left to right, obviously. Let's do a border. Oop. Let's do a border. There we go. Give it a width of 400. That's 300, 400. Height is going to be 200. You can already start seeing the structure of what it's going to look like. Let's add a background to it. We don't want a well, you could add a solid color, really. You could do like a background, let's say orange, if that's what you prefer. That's not quite what I'm going to do. I want a more gradient one. Also, yes, this is a border and it's not, as you can see right now, the corners aren't rounded off, but we're going to get to that. We're actually going to use clipping rather than just a corner radius. And that's really important because we're going to have an image within it. Then again, this is all theoretical. You can customize this whichever way you feel fits your project, right? That's the beauty of these tutorials. All right, so we'll do border, the background. It's going to have a linear gradient brush. Start point is going to be 0, 0. End point is going to be 1, 2. Yes. I'll move this over here so you can see it better. We'll do a gradient stop. Gradient stop. There we go. Self-close that one. Color. I had a somewhat of a blue color. It's like 5BC3FF. Yeah. I need to set an offset of 0.0. This one's going to have an offset of 1. Obviously a slightly darker color. So we'll do like 3A0FF. And I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you should be able to see it on your screen if you did the same thing, how it kind of gradually fades from top left to bottom right. I love that effect. Now let's add the border clip as well. So border, border.clip, here we go. Rectangle geometry, sounds scary, but it's really not. Radius X, gonna be 10. Radius Y, gonna be 10. Rect, now forming the actual rectangle. 0, 0, 400, and the height was 200. Right. Now you can see that it rounds out the edges. And again, it's going to be clipping everything inside it. So when we go to add an image, it's actually going to clip off the image as well. All right, let's go ahead and add a grid. It's going to be inside here. We'll create a stack panel. It's going to contain a text block. This can have whatever text you feel like. I'm going to set the text to whatever was in the showcase. So world leader followed by, this is how you break a line in SAML. It's very strange. So you do the and character followed by hashtag x0a semicolon. It's a hashtag. There we go. We'll do in global finance. Close it off with a quotation mark as well, obviously. So that's one way of breaking a line. Now the text looks boring and it looks like it doesn't fit and it looks like, well, it looks like crap. That's why we changed some of the properties, like the foreground to white. Already looking a billion times better. Font size to 28. That's quite big. Margin 20, 10, 10, 0. Here we go. Now the font, is it really that big? Yeah, okay, it's not that big. And it's gonna look better once we change the font as well. Let's create another text block underneath. We can actually copy this one for simplicity's sake. We'll change the text to get started today. Exclamation mark. Let's give it a size of 18 rather. See, that's already looking so much better. Right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click images, open folder in File Explorer, and we can see how this folder is empty. I'm gonna add in this man character right here. And it didn't update straight away. It might add a copy. It did not. Okay, cool. So the one that I'm using is this one. This will be added in the project files on my Patreon. Again, you can find that in the description. Right, so this is the image that I'm going to be using. You can use whatever you feel like. Right underneath the stack panel, we want to create an image. We can self-close that one. We'll set the width to 250. Height going to be 250. Source is obviously going to be images/man.png. There we go. It's looking so nice. Horizontal alignment, center. Actually, let's put it to the right. Vertical alignment, bottom. You know what? The margin, we're gonna move this manually to the point where it looks better. Here we go. Something like that looks really good to me. And see how we generated the properties for us? Looking good. All right, and now we just add a couple of more borders and we're good to go. Right, so underneath the border, but still within the stack panel, I'm gonna create a new border with, let's put it at, I don't know, 200, height 200. Let's actually style that a little bit better. Here we go. That a corner radius 10, because we're not adding an image to this one. And we're gonna do the same thing with the background. We're just gonna change the color. So we can add that in here straight away. We're actually not going to self-close that. There we go. Add a margin to this as well. So going from the left, we'll do like 50, 0, 0, 0. Or like 45. Yeah, 45. And the colors, instead of blue, we'll do FFC554. And obviously not blue at the bottom. We want a darker shade of orange. So we'll do FFB73A. Yes, that's looking good. All right, perfect. Now underneath, let's just clean this up a little bit. We can, yeah, let's keep it like that. Underneath the stack panel, we want to create a new stack panel because it's going to be a stack panel down here. We can copy this text blocks that we have up here. Let's chuck that in there. Obviously change the font size to something more appropriate, like 20. We'll change the text to most watch. Instead of 20 here, we'll do 10. All right, and inside the stack panel, we'll create another stack panel with the orientation of horizontal. You guessed it. Orientation, horizontal. We'll create a couple of borders in here. These are going to be a bit more simple. So we'll do width 150, height 150. Background on the first one is going to be 84 4E FF. Yes, corner radius of 10. And let's make 4 of these. 2, 3, 4. We could set the margin on each one individually, but I have a better idea. Let's change the colors. Second one's going to be 4E 99 FF. Third one's going to be 4E FF 91. Yes. And then EC FF 4E. Right, looking good so far. Now the stack panel itself. Let's do stack panel.resources. We'll do a quick style here inside. Target type, obviously. X type. Border. Whoop. Border. Setter is going to have a property, going to be margin. The value is going to be going from left. We'll do 15, 0, 0, 0. All right, look at that. And obviously, if we want this one to, you know, stay in line with these, we can just get this first one, the first border, and set a margin of 0. Here we go. All right, and that's it. Now we just gotta make sure to set the appropriate content in here. So if we run it right now, nothing's gonna happen because we haven't bound it yet. Let's go ahead and create a view model to associate with the view that we just created as well. Inside the view model, we'll create a new class. We'll call this home view model. Let's add that real quick. We don't have to add any code in here. We have our home view. Let's head into app.saml. And this is where we're going to create a data template. This is something that's really cool as well. So underneath the merge dictionary, still within the resource dictionary, we'll create a data template. It's not going to be self-closed. The data type is, well, we haven't added the namespace for the view model. So let's do that real quick. XML ns for namespace, give it a prefix of view model equals. And we can just type in view model and we should get the path, which is CLR, namespace, the name of the project, the name of the folder, NVVM, and then the view model folder. So now we can access the actual view model by doing, finding to x type view model. Here we go. I'll do home view model. Here we go. Now this obviously is not completed. We need to associate the view with it. So we can do the same thing here, but instead of view model, we'll call it view. Instead of view model, we'll do view, and we'll do view. Here we go. Home view and self-closed. Should be able to rebuild this. All right, there we go. Rebuilding it by doing Control-Shift-B maps everything correctly. This step is really important because once we actually start binding, it needs to be able to map correctly. So heading into the main view model, we want to create a full property. So we'll do prop full tab. It's going to be of type object. And it's going to be underscore current view. We can change this one as well to current view. There we go. Within the setter, we actually want to call on property changed. Here we go. So that the view actually updates when we change it. We're also going to create a property of type home view model. We're going to call it home VM. We're going to call it home VM. In the constructor, we're actually going to assign it to a new instance. There we go. And we can actually set the current view. Actually, let's bind it first so you can see the actual difference. Heading back into the main window, we can go to the content control. We can set content, we can bind it, binding. We actually got to set the data context as well. So let's just keep that as is for now. So heading up to the top, we'll do window, data context. And now we need to add the namespace just like we did in here for the view model. So you can actually just copy that, paste it in here. And you can do view model and just choose the main view model. Now we've bound this, but it's not actually binding properly. Binding current view. There we go. Now the current view is empty. It's null, so it's not going to show anything. However, if we go into the main view model, change the current view equals to home VM, tab back, build this real quick. There we go. Now it's actually showing the custom view that we created. We'll run this. We can see that it's looking absolutely beautiful. I don't like the spacing in between most watched. We need some more spacing in here. So I'm actually just going to head into the home view real quick. Go to the stack panel. Let's add margin 0, 0, 0, 10. And that's looking way better. Actually change the height a little bit. There we go. All right, now the final part of the puzzle. When we click an item, we want it to change views. So let's go ahead and let's create a quick view. We're not actually going to customize it. We're just going to set a custom background. So go into view, add, user control. We'll call this discovery view. All we got to do here is change the background. So let's do background. Let's do one hashtag 1B, 1B, 1B. It's going to have like a dark color. Yep. And the view model, let's not forget that. Create a new class, discovery view model. Again, head into app. Let's copy the data template, paste that one in. Discovery view model, discovery view. Here we go. Super simple. Heading back into the main view model, we're going to create a new property. It's going to be a discovery view model. We'll call it discovery VM. We'll do the same thing here. So discovery view model, assigning it. Discovery view model. Perfect. That's the view stuff done. Now we just got to create two commands so we can switch between the two views. We'll do prop. This is where we start utilizing our relay command. Call this home view command. Same thing for the discovery view command. There we go. Let's assign those real quick. Let's do home view command equals new relay command. Gonna chuck a lambda in there. Actually, it's not an anonymous function. We're actually passing in an object followed by curly braces for the function body. And we can close that off. We can actually add some spacing in between here so we can see it better. And all we got to do is when we click that button is we got to change the current view to home VM. You can guess what happens when we click the discovery view command. So discovery view command. Instead of home view, we want to set it to the discovery VM. And that's literally it. All we got to do now is head over to the home view, the main view, the actual main window, and bind the commands. So I'm going to make this toggled by default. Is toggled, is checked, is the one, true. So that way it's, it's on the home one by default. We're also going to do command binding. This is going to be home view command. And the final piece of the puzzle And do the same thing here, but instead it's going to be discovery view command. Now, if everything works as expected, we can now switch between views. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create this awesome, stunning piece of art. And keep in mind, you're not stuck with the design. You can change this however you like. If you don't like the colors, if you don't like the structure, that's totally fine. You have a really good base of creating a very well-managed app, and you now know how to work with multiple views and various other things. Oh shoot, I almost forgot to show you how to implement a custom font. So the font that I used in the example that I showed you in the beginning of the video is called Poppins. You can find it on fonts.google.com. So you can go ahead and download this font. You don't need to install it. Go ahead and right click your fonts folder, open folder in File Explorer. You can go ahead and just add the font into here. You can then go ahead and drag it into the fonts folder. There we go. It's a build action resource. That's perfect. All right. And then all you got to do in order to actually change the font is to set the font, not the font weight, but the font family to /fonts to point towards the correct directory /#Poppins. There we go. And it updates. Now, obviously you can just copy this over and change it wherever it needs to be changed. So let's say you want to change it for the actual button. We need to head into the menu button theme, the actual text block, and just set it right there. And as you can see, it looks way better. And then you can just go ahead and change it for the Discover title, the actual text in here, and wherever you feel like you need to. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you sticking all the way to the end if you managed to do so. I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons that I've had recently. You can see their names on the screen right now. If you haven't already, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if this video helped you out. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.